Black Canary drives to the Arrow Cave as Oracle tries to convince her to stay in Gotham. Black Canary says she will return, but has to deal with Oliver's affairs first. Once Black Canary arrives in the Arrow Cave, she finds Harley Quinn, and the two briefly fight before Canary has to throw up in a bucket. The two women have a heart-to-heart, and through this conversation we learn that Harley Quinn had once been pregnant. Harley also desires to help the Resistance stop Superman. Elsewhere, the Guardians of Oa assess the situation on Earth. They learn from Guy Gardner that Sinestro has joined Superman and implores them to call all of the Guardians to stop them. Later, Black Canary joins the Resistance as they attack Superman's super soldiers. Commissioner Gordon then captures them in order to interrogate them. 7 months later, Black Canary gives birth to Connor Queen, but they are interrupted by Guy Gardner, who reveals he is coming to Earth alongside an army of Green Lanterns, including Mog. Superman and Sinestro learn of this and rally normal humans to fight for their planet. Batman challenges this, and it tells the Resistance that the war is coming. As the lines are drawn, Batman reveals he will assist Oracle in leading the ground team. We also learn that the Resistance have a man inside, which is revealed to be Lex Luthor. The war between the Green Lanterns and the Resistance versus Superman's forces begins. The Resistance strikes back, taking over the Hall of Justice in the process. Black Canary is also given a kryptonite bullet by Alfred, with Batman imploring her to keep him alive. Commissioner Gordon learns from Lex Luthor that he knows who Oracle is, and that Cyborg will be able to trace her. Lex and Gordon head to the Watchtower. The Resistance attempts to steal a plane from Ferris Aircraft. Carol alerts Hal Jordan to this, and he immediately heads to her location. Guy, attempting to save the Resistance, follows him. Things quickly begin to escalate, however, when Sinestro attacks Guy. Garthanet then attacks the Sinestro Corps and Hal. Garthanet also takes Hal Jordan's Green Lantern ring, but Sinestro offers Hal the yellow ring. Elsewhere, Jim Gordon stops Cyborg and saves Oracle, but in the process accelerates his cancer, which takes his life. Black Canary heads towards Superman, and Garthanet takes out legions of Sinestro Corps and defeats Superman. He begins to fall and is bombarded by the Resistance fighters. Black Canary takes down Superman and shoots him in the chest. The Resistance believe they've won the war. Superman, however, is suddenly then given the yellow ring by Sinestro. Can the Resistance defeat Superman, or will Superman's Resistance destroy them? Continues to do some very interesting stuff with the Injustice universe. And I always get so impressed with Tom Taylor's ability to change what could have been a very generic story into a highly interesting universe. And he uses a lot of stuff from old 52, some of the new 52, and sort of builds a universe that, although it's dying, and although a lot of things are going to hell, he still manages to make this universe work. I'm so impressed that he's managed to do that. We see the Green Lantern and the Resistance go up against Superman and his forces. Yeah, but the only problem with this book is a lot of it does feel just a big giant fight scene. Or a big final battle scene. A big giant battle scene. And that's really what most of this volume feels like to me. There's less of the intrigue and more action driven. But to be fair, so was volume 2 of Injustice Year 1. So I can't really complain that Tom Taylor's not doing the same thing, because he is doing the same thing. But, see, another impressive thing that Tom Taylor does is that he sets up a lot of his interesting stuff in his first volume, so that, so that in volume 2 he can just focus on the story, which he essentially does in this volume to a very, very good degree. The battles in this story were very, very impactful. A lot more impactful than some of the stuff than some of the fights were in Injustice Year 1. And I very much enjoyed it. And we also get an occasion where the Resistance look like they're gonna win. But then they don't at the same time. And I'm kind of interested to see that the Resistance really are trying to win this battle. But Superman and the Justice League are so powerful now that it's really impressive to see, the rise of Superman and the rise of his empire. Sinestro. Sinestro is by far is one of the most is such an interesting character in this book. And the idea that Sinestro is presenting is really interesting as well. Because Sinestro symbolizes fear. And he sort of controls fear. And what I really, really like about Sinestro is that he's spreading that fear and he's spreading his ideals to characters like Hal Jordan and Superman, which increases their fall, essentially. It makes them into a vilified character, and I really, really like that. That sort of, that the more these characters are interacting with characters like Sinestro, the more they are beginning to fall into the darkness themselves. Other than that, there are some really interesting things being brought up in this comic that I just wanted to touch upon. First off, Carol Ferris really does mirror Lois Lane. Especially for Hal Jordan. And we see this also tie in to what's happening between the interaction between Hal Jordan and Sinestro. Basically, if Carol were to ever die, Hal Jordan would have the same reaction as Superman had with Lois Lane. And we see Hal Jordan's insecurities and fear really play out in this story. And I really, really like that. Especially when in the last volume, Black Canary said, "Oh, Hal, you need to get a girlfriend." And Hal does just that. But now he's afraid to lose that himself. And I do really, really empathize with Hal for that, because he now has something to lose, and I just think that's really, really interesting. We also get something that was so interesting. Harley Quinn implies that she may have had Joker's baby, which goodness knows how that kid would have turned out. But yeah, it's implied that Harley Quinn may have become pregnant with Joker's baby. I'm not gonna say more than that, but I just wanted to talk about this as well. I'm not gonna spoil what happens to that baby, or whether or not it was Joker's baby. You're just gonna have to read the story. Or what happens to that baby. But Harley Quinn being pregnant is something that I could buy as a story. Because Joker was really, really violent. And the Joker and Harley were in a relationship. Whether or not it was a healthy relationship doesn't matter. Harley Quinn was still in a relationship with the Joker. And whether it was consensual or non-consensual, I would buy that Harley Quinn would have become pregnant at some point. And how Tom Taylor sort of A, introduces that story, and B, sort of explains what happened to Harley, was really, really interesting, and really makes you think about Harley Quinn, and sort of it presents her in a really, really human sort of light, and I just really, really like that. Also, Harley Quinn is really, really funny as well. She gets some great moments in this volume, and out of all of the things that this comic does well, Harley Quinn is one of them. Because the New 52 really, really has really been struggling to present Harley Quinn in a sort of unique way. They're sort of changing up how the Batman animated series presented her. But in this comic, Tom Taylor manages to do it, but manages to make her into a semi-interesting character at the same time. And I just really, really liked her as a character. Like, I like this character a lot more than I do in Harley in the New 52. And Another thing that I liked was Guy Gardner. Guy Gardner is one of the focus characters that Tom Taylor sort of deals with. And I really, really like that Guy Gardner says something in just a few short mentions. Tom Taylor essentially talks about Guy Gardner and his place in the DC universe. Because Guy Gardner is always treated as a bit of a joke. He's never taken seriously. And what I really, really liked about Tom Taylor is that he makes Guy Gardner into a heroic character. Also, he makes characters like Garthanet interesting, and makes Garthanet and the other Guardians just do such really cool things, and I really, really liked that. The twist ending. The twist ending was, in my opinion, really, really weird. And this is one of the downsides that I have to this story, is that Tom Taylor sought to create a happy ending to this story. Because, especially what happens with Jim Gordon, which I'm not gonna ruin because, the stuff that happens with Jim Gordon is really, really interesting, and you should pick up this book for that. Tom Taylor tries to create a happy ending in a probably otherwise maybe an unhappy book. And although maybe I kind of liked the ending because it was happy, but I thought it was just a little odd that that this twist ending happened. And I will admit, whilst I liked the idea of it, I kinda didn't really dig it at the same time. Finally, just wanted to touch upon the annual. The annual was really, really good. The annual, unlike the volume itself, or the rest of the volume, finally touches upon Oracle mourning for Nightwing. And she's also mourning for her mother, and she's also mourning for her dying father. And I just really, really like the fact that finally we got to see an Oracle actually mourn and be a little bit human. She definitely had that moment in the rest of the volume, but I just like the fact that she touched upon the Nightwing stuff in this episode. And we also get a very interesting story about the UR Force, which I'm not sure if that's a Green Lantern comic book thing, but it was definitely a really interesting story, and I wouldn't be surprised if the UR Force turns out to be a new thing. Because it just seemed like such a fresh idea that Tom Taylor made. And if it's not fresh, Tom Taylor did a really good, managed to do a really good, story there. All in all, I give this comic about a 4 out of 5. Really, really liked, this volume. I just didn't maybe like the fact that all of the story was a big giant fight scene and the ending.